subdivision may or may not look like at the end of the day. The Class CA process is simply about, if there's a subdivision that's approved, what's the best way to service it for water and wastewater? And those two pathways can be done in parallel. And in this case, we sort of started down the municipal approval pathway, and then servicing sort of became an overall important question. So then the Class CA process was given some precedent there. And following that, then the municipal approvals will continue down its next pathway as well. Next slide, please. Just the one thing I also wanted to mention is I'm at council's discretion. If you prefer to have questions and ask them during, I'm fine with that, or I can go through and do whatever you would like to do. Excuse me, this poster is a summary of the 5 phases of the Class CA process for water and wastewater. So the Class CA was defined originally with the intent of trying to streamline approvals. And it starts out with phase 1, which is identifying those constraints. Phase 2 is looking at alternative concepts. Phase 3 is looking at alternative designs. Phase 4 is the draft ESR or the ESR itself, and basically summarize everything together. And the yellow bullets are points for consultation. So where we are right now is really at a discretionary PIC that's between phase 3 and issuance of the draft ESR. I got asked some questions as well about the Class CA process, and there's some current proposed amendments to what the Class CA process is going to be. The provincial government started that last February, and it made some significant changes to the process. They've come out again on December 5th, just a couple of weeks ago, with some proposed amendments to the amendment. And if the proposed amendments from December 5th are to proceed through, what it will mean for the Class CA process is, you can think of it as it basically would terminate at the end of phase 1, 2, with the consultation as well. And then from there, it would jump into basically detailed design and detailed agency approvals. So it would move from that process and go straight to basically NECP approvals. The other thing that that proposed amendments to is they fix timelines for different steps. So for me, this project started in 2018, and the Class CA officially started in 2022. So it's been a considerable length of time. With the new amendments, and it's basically to streamline that process, and you'd be done in between 6 and 9 months at the most, and as little as 120 days. So next slide. Let's go with the next slide. That's just the summary from phase 1, 2, which I already mentioned. So where we're at today is not exactly following the script of the 5 phases, because what we've done is, in essence, we released a initial draft of the draft ESR. And the purpose of that is so that Township's councillors and staff can go through the review. The report has been reviewed by BM Ross already. So we've gone through several iterations. The other thing is with intent to release the report in draft form as well to the Township of Perth East. So we're kind of adding an extra step in this process. The other thing that's happening right now is the draft ESR report is being reviewed by the Ministry of the Environment. And we expect to get comments back from them in January, is what they've committed to. or early January is what they had suggested. So at that point, we would look, and there's also a PIC that's scheduled for January 8th in Sebringville. And we would look to incorporate comments that are received between now and then into that final draft DSR. It gets published for a 30-day statutory review period. And then comments that are received during those 30 days are addressed through the report process. And then the report is considered approved and final. There is another step where someone could ask the minister to bump it up, but there's very limited restrictions where that would apply. So.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
Just to clarify then, tonight we are receiving this?
Right, okay, so, and I know on the agenda, it had indicated that council was endorsing the draft DSR. And of course, council is free to choose however they wish to proceed. I view it, there's sort of several steps there. You could go with that original wording and endorse it. You could also simply endorse the major recommendations in the draft DSR, or you could also just receive the report for review as well. So that's.
Yeah, I think just to add to that, I think the applicant's certainly aware that this evening is largely for information gathering, to give council and the public that a longer chance to review it and have that time, so to receive it. You know, they're comfortable with receiving for information, having the public meeting and the comments, and coming back to council, so they're comfortable with that approach, just add it in there.
Perfect, so the 30 days that you're referring to don't start till after that.
That's correct. So the 30-day statutory review period would commence after the PIC and after comments from the MECP are incorporated into that report. So it's sort of a draft DSR, if you will, right now.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Forget the next slide, please. So in phase 3, we look at, well, what are the alternative designs that would satisfy those solutions? And they're comprised of certain steps. The decision in phase 1 and 2 was to serve just the subdivision. So we're looking at where would the plant location be? What would the setbacks for the plant location be to sensitive users, which in reality is residential housing? A location for a discharge from the plant, what the effluent criteria can be, as well as then what are the engineering processes that are accommodated with the plant in order to provide the level of treatment that is needed to hit the effluent criteria. And can you go up just a little bit there? So under drinking water, same sort of idea. Where would the plant go? What would it use as a water source? What treatment requirements are required to provide a safe supply, and storage requirements for a combination, in this case, for both drinking water and fire protection. Next slide. To answer those questions, we've done a number of other studies along the way that provide input into making those decisions. The first one is called an assimilative capacity study. And the purpose of that is to assist in quantitatively evaluating potential locations for the effluent discharge and looking at what the effluent criteria from the plant would be for those different locations. So that's based on going out and sampling surface water quality across the study area. And there's a whole series of steps that allow us to identify what those criteria are. The other thing that we did was an aquifer testing program. So one of the questions is, well, what would you need to do in terms of designing a well supply system that could provide the volume of water that's potentially needed for the subdivision? Keeping in mind, we don't know exactly what the subdivision design is going to be and how many houses and that kind of thing, but we have some idea in terms of the scale of all of that. So within the subdivision lands, we drilled the test well in block 24. And then we did a pump testing program on that well itself so that we could measure aquifer properties and groundwater properties in place for a well that is actually going to be used as that source. Then the other thing we did was an odor modeling study. So based on assumptions relating to plant design and potential locations for that plant, the odor potential from the plant is one of the factors that NECP looks at in terms of setbacks to the plant from sensitive users. So instead of working with, I'll call it the generic requirements, we went the extra step of actually modeling that particular plant location and coming up with that outcome, which would then, we're gonna have to do it anyway. So we would have had to do it normally at the ECA stage. So we've gone ahead and completed it. Next step, next slide, please. So there's two aspects to the assimilative capacity study, and part of it is looking at hydraulic flow quantity, and then also looking at water chemistry and effluent water chemistry. So one of the questions is, how will the plant outfall affect the hydraulic properties of potential receivers? So the outcome of that solution was to recommend that the Ibergen drain be used as the point of discharge. So we focused on the flow in the Ibergen drain and what the potential flow from the wastewater plant would look like compared to the flow in the Ibergen drain. Flow under dry conditions, which is the Ibergen drain is dry most of the time, is basically an easy answer. You're not going to do anything in terms of the hydraulic performance of it. So then it comes down to, well, what happens under flood conditions? And I included this slide because a photo that a local resident had taken at a time when the Ibergen drain was getting close to the top of its banks. So part of this is also coupled with the stormwater report that was prepared as part of the municipal application. So when we look at the flow, so the flow from a plant, the average flow is approximately 2.7 liters per second. The stormwater pond and its design currently, which still has to go through engineering review and design, or approval, sorry, is to limit the flow from the stormwater pond to the 5-year storm. The 5-year storm is 289 liters per second. So we're looking at the flow from a plant is about 1% of what a 5-year storm would be. And I also got asked the question about, well, what's the capacity of the Ibergen drain? And so its current configuration was modeled as part of the stormwater report. The flow of the drain is the capacity of it is approximately 3,300 liters per second. The capacity of the culvert underneath Station Road is only about 2,000 liters per second. So that's pretty much a 100-year storm is what the capacity of the drain is. So you can see, looking at those numbers, that the average effluent flow that would come from a plant is a very small function of that. And that's important in terms of how we make the decision about which receiver to pick. The next slide, please. So in terms of the surface water quality, we look at several different data sources. The first data source is the Provincial Water Quality Monitoring Network, which maintains water quality sampling stations across the province and provides a long-term database, some of them going back 30, 40, 50 years. This is what this map is, and it shows the locations that are close to here, so that provides some long-term data. Next slide, please.
That's a nice question.
Sure.
So, when we were talking about the Iberg drain, as it stands now, is there any work that will need to be done on the Iberg drain?
So in terms of the hydraulic performance, there isn't a requirement right now, other than possibly doing a clean out to make sure that it's not choked by vegetation. But in terms of its physical shape of the channel, it meets all of the requirements. So we wouldn't have to do any significant modifications. We'd have to talk with the engineer regarding the stormwater outfall, and as of that process, there might be a requirement to upgrade the size of the culvert underneath Station Road. But for the purpose of having a wastewater plant, there's no requirement to change the drain.
Okay, and then, before the meeting, I asked you about the swim pond
Yes.
versus, the influent, it doesn't go in the swim
Right.
pond, so there's two different pipes going. Like you cleared that up.
Yeah.
The government won't let you, or the,
Right. The Ministry of Environment does not look favorably about using stormwater ponds as the point of discharge. So in this case, and part of the comments that we received a long time ago from MECP and from UTRCA was to basically minimize the number of outlet structures into the watershed. So in this particular case, the outlet from the stormwater pond will be a single outlet. It'll have some sort of a head wall structure. And I have some pictures of what those might look like. The effluent from the plant would basically be piped into that same outlet structure. So you would effectively have two pipes, one from the stormwater pond, one from the wastewater plant, to come in and give you, two pipes joining a Y with one outlet into the watershed.
I'd like to just clarify, nobody's swimming in it. It's no one.
no.
This looks like swimming.
My reason for that is I didn't want to see an eyesore there,
Yeah,
from the discharge from the sewage plant.
so
It's gonna be like Shakespeare. When we
Yes.
did the tour.
the Shakespeare one is a good example. If you recall, there. It comes out on the south side of the plant and it goes into a small little manhole that's outside the building. And that is discharged by a pipe out into the Shakespeare drain in that case. So this would look familiar to that. And in Shakespeare, likely if you didn't know that was the drain or the outlet, you would never even know it was there.
I was impressed with that open house we had there.
Good. The short message here is this plant is, and what the conclusions are, is basically very similar to what Shakespeare would look like. Or what Shakespeare does look like.
Thank you.
So. The other thing that we did was take surface water samples on a monthly basis in 2012 and also in 2024. I think in 2012, we did 6 stations in Sebringo itself. And in 2024, I think it was 9. But it included within Black Creek, within the tributaries to Black Creek, and also the Iberg drain as well, directly. Both those years. That database basically presents a picture of what existing water quality is within the watershed. And MECP have various regulations and policies that dictate based on what existing water quality is, what you are allowed to discharge. And so the combination of that plus the combination of looking at what the treatment technologies are capable of achieving, and also looking at the sensitivity of the receptor. From there, we end up proposing effluent criteria, and they have 2 parts. There's an effluent objective, which is the goal that the plant tries to hit every day. And then you have compliance criteria. So those are numbers where if you go above those particular numbers, then the plant's not in compliance and it becomes a hard action item, or you need to take certain steps to bring it back into compliance. And I apologize, I know I use a lot of acronyms and I put some of them at the bottom of this. You can go up to the next one. So what I've done in this is provided a comparison of what the proposed effluent criteria would be for Sebringville, and compared that to a number of other existing wastewater plants and their criteria that are a combination of local plants. They're all discharged to surface water, so we're only looking at surface water criteria in this case. And then I also use some other plants where we work at where they are very similar in size to what Sebringville would be. And the outcome is basically that the proposed effluent criteria through the ACS property for Sebringville is very similar to what the effluent criteria that were actually approved at other facilities, both locally and that's charged to surface water. The other thing I wanted to mention is, so at this stage in the Class CA process, the effluent criteria are what I would call maximum criteria. So the idea is, once you get into the detailed design of the plant, once you get into MECP review, you may end up tightening those criteria to reflect a process that is capable of providing a higher quality effluent. And so the numbers that I've included here, and those are the two rows that are in green just for comparison. I would see the plant having approved effluent criteria that would be equal to these values or better, but higher quality than these values. Next slide, please. We can talk about the aquifer testing program. So next slide. So this figure shows where the location of the test well is, which is in block 24. And we've also plotted the location of wells that are I don't remember if it was 500 or 700 meters distant from the test well or from the subdivision lands. So these are private wells, and we also included the location of the municipal well that serves the Boyce Street supply. Next slide, please. So two things. When we were looking at how to design the water supply, we wanted to ensure that the design particularly minimized the potential for impact between subdivision supply wells and existing wells that are within the community now. So the MECP have a database of most wells, not every single well, because the database didn't become really accurate until 2005. But the database provides a lot of information about depth and yield and what aquifer units are intercepted and that kind of thing. So the wells in the community basically draw water from depths that are more shallow than about 55 meters. But we also know from other work in the area that there's a lot of agricultural wells that are used for irrigation, as well as livestock that are higher yielding wells that draw water from a deeper isolated aquifer system. So the thought process was to target the test well to that deeper supply so that the potential for interference with existing community wells is minimized and protected against. So the test well is about 410 feet deep and is capable of producing a great deal of water. what we did as part of that was an aquifer testing program. But what we do is what's called step testing. So you start out at a low rate and you do a short duration test for about an hour. And then you gradually increase the rate until you, and then at the end of the day, we tested for 24 hours straight at the maximum rate of the pump that we had available to us could produce. So within that 24-hour period, we pumped the total amount of water that was about 7 days supply for the subdivision. And during that process, we monitor water levels in the pump well. We also took samples and monitored water levels in 4 private wells where those residents had volunteered to allow us to monitor their wells. And their water levels are the 4 solid colored lines at the top. And the water level, the blue one that shows drawdown, that's the water level that was in the pump well. So there's 2 things that you can see. Yeah, that's the one for the pump well. You can see at the beginning, basically, the water level dropped very quickly and then stabilized. And that's one of the characteristics of a good well. You can also see at the end of the test, when we turned off the pumps, we had complete recovery within a very short period of time. The other thing that we look at is, well, what happened to the water levels in the private wells? And you can see that there was about a 1.5% change in the water column in those wells, and would not have in any way affected those wells' continued use as a water supply. Yes.
I'm just wondering, did you monitor the Black Creek water well at the same time?
Pardon me?
Did you monitor the Black Creek water well at the same
So
time?
we wanted to do that, but the part of the problem with that is Aqua has a disinfection protocol. So if we had opened up the well to put our probes in to monitor the water levels, they needed to shut down the well for between 1.5 and 3 days to disinfect it and reestablish that it's a clean well system. So we were not allowed to do that. However, what we did do is 2 of the wells are basically between the test well and where the Boyce Street well is. So those wells in essence act as a sentry well. So those private wells are at the same elevation as the Boyce Street well. So we know from hydraulic properties that the Boyce Street well would have had a lesser impact than those 2 wells because those 2 wells are closer. The Boyce Street well is about 1,100 meters away. So, part of all that, you can have the next slide. So at the upper test rate for the well, we pumped 832 liters per minute for a 24-hour period. And based on so when you look at that drawdown and you compare how much of the water column in that well was used to achieve the 832, you can then calculate, well, what we call the sustainable yield of the well. And the sustainable yield is a volume or a rate that could theoretically be pumped for a very long period. We use 20 years on a continuous basis and not deplete the water column in the well by more than 70%. And that's, and in the report, I put 1,200 liters per minute. In reality, it's probably quite a bit higher than that. The problem is, I don't like extrapolating too far, right? So if we took 832 and said, okay, based on our confidence in the test procedure and the results, a 50% increase is certainly doable and is scientifically reasonable to do. So that's where we got 1,200. To test it for sure, we probably have to put in a 2,500 liter per minute pump. So. And that's not part of the plan, nor do we need that much water, right? I mean, we pump. A day of water in, about 2.5 hours, so. It's a good well. The other part of the recommendations, can you just bring that up a little bit? So. When we work on water supplies, we like having backup. So even though this one well is more than capable of meeting the needs of the subdivision, we would recommend installing a second well as a backup. Normally, in that case, they get used alternately, so one pumps one day, one pumps the next day. Some places use it just as a backup and they only turn it on when the other one dies. I'm not a fan of that, because now you have a pump that's sitting there and it might be 20 years down the road, and who's to say the pumps can still be working after it's been sitting there for that long. The second well, we would propose that the design is essentially exactly the same as what the test well design is. So again, it would draw water from the deeper aquifer, and the net effect, net potential effect on private wells is going to be the same, because you're only going to pump one at a time. You're not going to pump both wells at the same time. Next slide, please. So those were kind of the extra studies that we did that provide input into into the Class CA decision point. Next slide, please. So the first step was to look at what are the recommendations for the plant location. You just go up a little bit, so there. We looked at 4 possible locations. 2 that are in the south that are along they're in the park area and close to the one on the east is close to the stormwater pond, and the one on the west is close to the edge of the subdivision lands. Location 3 was in block 24. That's location 3, and then location 4 was that one there that's just right on the edge of the Ibergen drain. We went through next slide, please. So we looked at a number of criteria about and provided scoring function to allow us to make a recommendation as to which of the locations we prefer. The factors look at odor and noise potential, the separation distance to the residences, protection of the natural environment, suitability of the current land use zoning, additional infrastructure requirements, and the suitability if future expansion was to be considered. And the outcome of that is the recommendation for the wastewater plant location is location 1, which is the one nearest the stormwater pond. Next slide, please. Coupled with that, and this is leading into the discussion on the odor modeling results. The Ministry of the Environment have recommendations and or requirements in terms of setbacks between a potential odor source, like a wastewater plant, and sensitive uses, and that covers a number of things, but in this case, the only one that's really applicable is existing as well as future residential use. It could cover off other things like schools and things like that. What this figure shows is we made a conceptual layout of what the plant would look like, and we identified a location where the outlet stack from the plant would be, which would be the primary source of odor that comes from the plant. And so for small size plants, which is up to basically double the size that would be used in Sebringville, the MECP have a recommended setback of 100 meters. it's not a requirement, and they do have a clause in there that says, if you can demonstrate with the combination of odor equipment and studies such as this one, that a lesser setback is possible, then you can apply to them to gain approval for that. So in this particular case, location 1 has a setback to the closest multiplex of approximately 65 meters. For larger plants, for plants with a capacity between 500 and 2,500, they have a mandatory requirement of a setback for 100 meters and a recommendation of 150. And for plants that are, 500 to 25,000, right? So even big plants, the recommended setback, if you're higher than 25,000, is that it must be a minimum of 150 meters. So, can I have the next slide, please? Oh, sorry.
That's, we seem to be working from two different drawings, right? This one, it appears to be the apartments again, where earlier you showed us the condos. Are the buildings in the same spot? Or,
Go ahead.
Maybe I'll answer that
Yeah.
one, just in
Yeah,
terms of
yeah.
planning. So the original planning application had apartment buildings on both block 99 and a block 100, which were the multi-unit blocks. Based on feedback from the public process of the planning applications, the owner decided to switch block 100 to basically they would be like a bungalow townhouse product. But it's always maintained that on block 99, it would be the 3-story apartment buildings. We have looked at multiple iterations of the design within the block of what those apartment buildings could look like. Because of this setting. So what you're seeing is townhouses have not been proposed on block 99 to date, in any submissions. What the owner looked at was, how could you design block 99 with apartments and not need an official plan amendment? So they could still be apartments. They're still apartment buildings with 8 units. You can get to a similar number of unit count, whereas these are apartments with 24 units. So I think as we've talked about in the past, the official plan amendment is to go from 8 to 24 units within a specific building. It doesn't actually change the density on the site, if that makes sense.
I think my question is just, if we were to return to this slide, like where it says condo blocks and there's not a. Is
So
this,
condo still means the same thing, so maybe it's just a
these small
terminology.
buildings are apartments?
Correct.
The same as this?
So the clarification is those are if you did 8-unit apartments, and those are if you did 24-unit apartments, but you get a similar yield. So we were looking at both options for the owner, because if you go with the option in the colored concept, you don't need an official plan amendment. Whereas the concept with the 4 buildings with more units, although the yield is the same, you need official plan amendment, and we've heard from the community and public input, there's a lot of concern with the official plan.
Okay, so I think my question then is the study still accurate? Are the buildings in the same position as reflect on this?
The answer to that is yes. So, there's 2 aspects to it, and I'll talk a little bit more about it here in the results of odor modeling. Excuse me, but because the MECP had a recommended setback of 100 meters for a plant of this size, and it's not a mandatory requirement. The idea is that the municipal approval for buildings that are within the 100 meters would have a hold designation until such time as the ministry approves that lesser setback. So if it's inside of 100 meters, you wouldn't be able to build it until that MECP approval came through. But setbacks from plants, and I'll show you some photos of them, I've seen as low as 35 meters, and it's quite frequent that it's somewhere in the 50 to 60 meter range. And I haven't had MECP reject that notion for any of those other plants, but in terms of, because the Class C process is parallel to the approvals process. Citing those, we didn't wanna create a conflict between the two processes. And so that was the one solution.
Maybe just elaborate from a planning perspective, so what the applicant would be asking when the zoning bylaw amendment comes back forward to township for consideration. Is block 99 and 100 would go to a multi-residential zone. And for those portions of the block that are within 100 meters of the facility, would have a holding provision. That would say you can't build within that area until MECP signs off on the odor modeling and a reduced setback. And this would allow those blocks, I mean, those, if I look at block 99, that's not all gonna be built on the same day. They will be phased building by building. And there's also options on site design, right? Because we're not at the site plan stage, that's many steps down the road. For example, those buildings could be rotated 90 degrees and have parking in the setback. So it just gives some options. It gives full control of the township that they're satisfied MECP is accepting of the odor modeling before allowing anything in the 100 meters.
Yes, follow on. So if my recollection is correct from the open house in Shakespeare, which again was very beneficial. These plants are modular and expandable, is that?
The setback in Shakespeare is 72 meters.
Okay.
This style of plant, as in the Shakespeare plant, uses an SPR design. And they're very good at not making odors. The other thing that we didn't do in Shakespeare is Shakespeare does not have any odor controls on it. Most of the plants I work on nowadays, we always put in carbon filtration. And carbon filtration depends on its form, but is generally 40 to 90% effective. And then there's other technologies you could implement as well. So there are fallbacks to make sure that odor doesn't become a problem.
To your question, yes, it's a modular, my understanding is a modular system.
So, you know, there's still a large chunk to the west, that could potentially in the future also be developed. Would the intent be that, you know, looking ahead 20 years, would we be looking at expanding that existing plant, or is that something that you're looking at in the build process in case of future expansion?
So I think to clarify is there's other lands to the west.
Yes.
That, well, not in the urban boundary. Who knows in 20 years if they will be or not.
Right.
I think the understanding is that this system would be able to expand to accommodate
That's correct.
other growth.
And
Is that?
so what would that do? Well, I guess things would probably be different regulations. Would that affect the setbacks and distance?
So, no, I mean, the reasonably foreseen expansion of the plant would still fit within the recommended setback.
Thank you.
The next slide, please. So, this is the outcome of the odor modeling, and it's color coded. So basically, orange represents higher levels, and blue and green represent very low levels. So the odor threshold in the province is 1 odor unit per second exposure, and you're allowed to, you must meet that criteria 99.5% of the time. So the 0.05% of the time is 44 hours per year. The odor model uses a standard US EPA model called AirMod. And the ministry in establishing odor modeling as a standard procedure years ago basically dictates exactly how the model is to be implemented and run. And in fact, the input parameters, which are your climate database, which is primarily temperature and wind direction and speed, as well as the topographic database, because because that affects basically how the wind blows. The MECP provides you with that output, so you're starting and that's their way of making sure that all of the odor studies in the province are all done using the same standard approach. So in this particular case, the highest, and so odor, we model on a 10-minute interval. The climate year that's currently in use is 2024. So the ministry gives you that as the baseline and they give you that data for that entire period. And you run it against the actual climate data that occurred throughout the 2024 year. The highest reading that we had here, I think was about 0.6, and that was only an individual reading. Keep in mind, you're allowed to exceed 1 up to 44 hours per year. So what this shows is based on the expected odor emissions from a plant like this, it really doesn't create a lot of odor, and that's what the outcome of this is, and that's confirmed by what was observed in Shakespeare. When we did this, we did not include any carbon filtration, so we didn't reduce the source concentrations by assuming that the plant design would take it out. Right? So this is basically a raw data, but I think it's very encouraging, and I believe the ministry would review this, and I would expect that they would approve that 65-meter setback. The highest reading that so we looked at the 99.5 percentile of data for every modeling point. The highest reading I think was 0.27, and that was a station that's 20 meters from the outlet stack. So you're well within that 65-meter threshold. Can I have the next slide, please? So these are some examples of stormwater pond outlets, head walls. So what would happen from the stormwater pond is it would have a control structure that would limit flow to that, what's proposed is the 289 liters per second into the Iberville drain. And coupled within this outlet, you would have that effluent pipe that would come from the wastewater plant and basically would discharge at the same mouth of that structure into the drain. So functionally, you really wouldn't know that it was a discharge location. And the next slide, please. So this is just a summary regarding the wastewater discharge. So we are going through another parallel process with Ministry of the Environment to review and agree with the outcome of the somewhat capacity study. The outlet itself, because it's within the high water line from the Iberville drain, so it will require both MECP and conservation authority permitting, particularly for the outlet from the stormwater pond. So the effluent criteria, depending upon what the ministry comes back with, may change a little bit. And then it's also going to be reviewed and agreed to in terms of the detailed design review of the plant with MECP as well. Next slide, please. So then we went through a long process to look at what are the treatment technologies that would be built into the plant. And this is still fairly conceptual at this stage, but we're breaking it down and becoming more and more detailed and looking at the different combinations. Next slide, please. So keep in mind that wastewater treatment in this province is primarily a biological process. So you're looking at how do you promote the growth of microbes so that they will consume the organics and the nutrients in the wastewater stream? And then you're looking at what do you have to do to polish that so you can release it back into the natural environment. And what that means is it can mean additional removal of nutrients, but it primarily means removing solids so that you don't have sediment in the water that's being discharged. Next slide, please. So so that initial process is primary treatment where you're looking at treating the organics. Secondary treatment, we look at things like chemical addition to remove nutrients. And tertiary treatment is, think of it as a fancy way to talk about filtering. And then because this is proposed to be a surface water discharge location, the effluent would be disinfected before it's released. The other part is sludge treatment. So the solids that come out of the process go down another treatment pathway. Next slide, please. And we looked at 8 different main technologies and provided a variety of criteria to eventually identify what we recommended as the preferred solution. And the preferred solution in this case is what you saw in Shakespeare, which is the modified sequence batch reactor. The report itself provides a lot of background on all of these and provides the weighting system that we used in terms of identifying what we think is the best one in this particular case. Next slide, please. So yes.
Can I just ask a quick question about this system that you've chosen here? It's, as a municipality, will we be responsible for getting rid of sludge? Is that a byproduct that is it treated within the facility?
So with sludge treatment, there's a variety of different ways. In most of the province right now, it is stabilized, which means you aerate it to take out any of the reactable organics. You thicken it somehow, and then that slurry gets spread on farm fields, and it's a soil supplement program. The other process that is becoming more common in southern Ontario is to basically take that sludge and pelletize it and use it as farm fertilizer. So in the US, the pelletizing and farm fertilizer process is very common, and it accounts for something like 70% of the sludge that's produced in the US. It's had a slow uptake here, but some of it is also demand and the availability of high volumes of sludge and that kind of thing. So
if I'm understanding this correctly, in this area of Ontario, all systems mean that we need to get rid of the sludge.
well, there is a pelletizing plant in Listool. So that is certainly
there's no
on the table to
option
do that.
within this that is self-treated.
It's not something that we would make a decision about that in terms of the Class CA, because it really isn't a differentiated process. All of these plants are gonna produce sludge. So you have to treat that somehow. They're all gonna produce sludge that has a very similar chemical composition. And it's something that the municipality is going to have to deal with in the long run. In Perth East, it goes into the lagoons in Milverton. And so the Shakespeare plant trucks their sludge to Milverton, where it then resides for a number of years in their lagoon there. And after that period, so they use a very passive method of treating. After it's been there for a long time, then it gets dredged out and put on farm fields.
Question.
Yes.
The Shakespeare unit, I guess, is an SBR. Could you
Yes.
speak to the modified SBR?
So
the difference?
the difference between a modified SBR and an SBR, so SBR stands for sequence batch reactor. And what that means is that the wastewater comes into the plant and it's treated in a batch process. So you bring in a certain volume, you run it through a series of steps inside the plant as a consistent batch. And then it gets disinfected and filtered and sent out. So you're treating everything in discrete batches. In a plant like Shakespeare, it's continuous inflow, but it has batch outflow. So processes are very similar, and there's not a substantial difference between how the process works. When you have continuous inflow, it provides some additional flexibility in terms of operation, because if you're gonna treat it as a true batch, you can't shut off your inflow. So you've got to redirect it either into a different basin or something like that while that batch process is going on. So in the plant design in a modified batch is a little um than an SBR, and operationally, I think it's easier as well.
Thank you.
So the factors we looked at in terms of comparing the different main technologies is whether or not it's capable of meeting the treatment targets, those effluent criteria. Can it handle variations in flow? So certain types of technologies are really good, providing they get exactly the same amount every day. Other plants, like NSBR is one of them, is tolerant of a certain variation in flow and can handle those periods of high flow, low flow. The ability to expand capacity, the aesthetics of the plant, manpower requirements. We also looked at life cycle costs, and so life cycle cost to me is a combination of both initial capital, ongoing monitoring and maintenance, and actual operations of the plant. So the plant, for tertiary filtration, you're going to be bringing in alum as a chemical that's then being introduced to aid in the treatment. So there's costs associated with those kind of things. Climate change effects is something that's a little harder to quantify because we don't know exactly what those are going to be. But in terms of a factor, you're looking for a plant that can operate robustly under different changing conditions. And also sludge generation. So how much sludge, some of them, it's a fairly narrow range, but some of them produce more sludge than others. Next slide, please.
Mike,
Yes.
that's a good question. Just curious on life cycle costs. At what point does the township take over the sewage and fresh water from the
So,
developer? Like how?
and that's a good
works
question.
for us?
So really that becomes a subsequent step after and becomes part of the detailed design. But the typical thing that happens is there's a responsibility agreement between the developer and the township. And as part of that, the township is going to be involved in what the detailed design of the plant is going to look like. Because to be honest, at the end of the day, it's going to be your plant. So you want to know what you're getting. Then usually part of that relates to construction of the plant. It usually includes things like main suppliers, so the main equipment. So let's say in the township of Essa, where we're building a plant in Baxter, the township has a number of other plants, and they said, well, we want all of our control panels to look the same so their staff don't have to learn something different, right? So that it can specify what those main equipment requirements are. It also specifies a turnover process. And so what happens there is normally at the beginning, and it's going to depend on the build out of the subdivision. In Baxter, there was a minimum requirement for 25 houses to be occupied. And for the plant even to commission. Because for that design, deemed that 25 houses, we needed that much sewage in order to maintain the biomass in the plant and not have it just die. So they needed to find a solution for the first 25 houses. Then they have to operate the plant up until the point of turnover to the municipality. In that particular case, it's based on 70% of occupancy in the subdivision. Okay. So in that particular case, it's gonna probably take 2 years. And the other part of that was the township uses Aqua as their operator at all of their plants. So part of the agreement is the developer has to use Aqua. So that the developer is basically in charge of ownership and operations and costs. But it's the township's operator that's learning the processes and learning how the plant works. And I mean, they're kind of like cars. Everyone is slightly different, right? So anyway, that is really up to the township as to how that process plays out. But that's a very typical process that's used in a lot of places. So what we recommended here was, and this carries it through the next step. So pre-screening, which is a mechanical screen, saw that in Shakespeare. It basically takes out J-cloths and plastic rings, and who knows, stuff that shouldn't go down the drain, but always does. Secondary treatment, primary treatment is recommended using a modified SPR design. And tertiary treatment, which is, in this particular case, will be chemical addition primarily for the removal of phosphorus. And removal of phosphorus is important because surface water bodies are sensitive to phosphorus concentrations. That's what creates algal blooms in lakes and things like that. So the levels that are prescribed are quite low. And tertiary filtration and treatment will be required in order to hit that. And we recommended using UV disinfection. The other common one is chlorination, and there's some other ones as well. But if you chlorinate water that's going into a surface water body, you have to dechlorinate it before you release it because the chlorine will kill the fish. And the solids treatment, we recommended that it would include thickening, stabilization, and storage. And then, so the requirements for a plant like this, it has to be capable of storing up to 240 days of sludge. That number is generated on the basis of when you can actively spread it on agricultural fields, because you can't spread it in the winter, you can't spread it in the rain. So you've got to be able to have enough storage to get you through to the drier summer conditions when you can spread it. Next slide, please. So this is a layout that's based on a couple of different plants that we've been involved with, and including Shakespeare. So the black box on the left-hand side is would be a separate building, and that would be where things like your office and lab and some of your other equipment like blowers and things like that for chemical storage and dosing. And what's in the blue box on the right-hand side are basically buried. In this case, it's a cast-in-place concrete design. At Shakespeare, you saw that the tanks were underneath the building as well as out front of the building. And through discussions with BM Ross and Township, the idea was to put the tanks in their own building so that the operator could visually see the whole component of the tanks. But have it as a separate building so that you don't have to worry about explosive gases and things like that. So this is an example layout. Next slide, please. So these are some examples. The first example, that's the Shakespeare plant. And that's the one you saw that's beside the community center. The next one down is in Everett. And that's in the middle of the community park. And that one has a setback of approximately 70 meters. In fact, that picture is standing on the closest neighbor's driveway. Next slide down, please. So this was the one that has the 35-meter setback between the neighbor. So you can see the neighbor's house on the right-hand side. And the point of release is that silver chimney on the left-hand side. And that plant does not have odor protection either. So they would have gone through the same process. And it's basically it's on a double lot in the middle of the subdivision. The bottom one, this is a combined plant in Worchert Stouffville. The setback in this particular case is about 50 or 55 meters. That was one that we were involved with almost 20 years ago. Next slide, please. Now we're going to switch to drinking water. And drinking water is a little easier because there's not as many requirements. We looked at the same 4 locations and go down to the next slide, please. We looked at different criteria in terms of evaluating what is the preferred location. So we looked at separation distance to existing wells, and the purpose of that is the closer you have a source well to neighboring residential wells, increased potential for impact. So that's really what that simplifies down to. Protection of the natural environment, suitability of current land use and zoning, suitability for future expansion and additional infrastructure requirements. We'll go ahead, next slide. The recommendation, okay, so in terms of treatment, the minimum requirement is potential for filtration and as well as disinfection. So the filtration is just intended to remove if there's sand or something like that. And in many cases with groundwater supplies, you don't have particulate in the water supply, so you don't have to do filtration. Disinfection, and in this case, we recommended chlorination because it's the simplest and least costly way to do both your primary disinfection. Primary disinfection kills anything that's in the water. Secondary disinfection provides a residual so that if there's any exposure within the distribution piping, it still has enough to kill any pathogens and whatever before it gets to neighbors' houses. And in terms of storage, we had recommended buried or partially buried storage tanks. So the photo on the left-hand side, it's from quite a bit bigger system than what would occur in Sebringville, but this is right around the corner from our office in Barrie. And the photo on the right is inside that plant in Worchert Stouffville, and that's the water supply plant there. So that's the kind of equipment you would have. It's just pumps and skids and that kind of thing. Next slide, please. We looked at, in the process of disinfection, we looked at the possibility of use of chlorination, UV, ozonation, or chlorinamination, which are just different techniques and recommended chlorination. Filtration, we looked at pressure filtration, rapid sand or membrane filters, and rapid sand and membrane filters are and in general more complex and more costly. And would exceed the requirements of what we expect the water quality would look like. And I want to add, we did take water quality samples during the test well procedure. So we have data from the well itself, so that was incorporated. And treated water, we looked at buried or partially buried reservoirs, a water tower, or standpipe, and recommended the buried or partially buried reservoir. Next slide, please. So the recommendations in this case, we recommended location 3, which is in block 24, which is the one, the red dot that was in the northwestern side of the subdivision lands, with 2 wells, a building for the treatment equipment, and it would have on-site storage as well as high lift pumping distribution to supply the houses. Next slide. So this is a concept of what the layout would look like. So that's block 23 and block 24. It shows the 2 wells. In this case, we put the building on top of the storage reservoir and has a driveway with a turnaround for bringing in equipment and that kind of thing. It's pretty simple setup. Next slide, please. Yes.
Sorry, just if I could take a minute to ask about fire protection. But
Yes.
in the document, there seems to be, I find it confusing, I'm not an engineer, but that we have or they have not.
Yes.
What is the fire protection plan and do we have storage for it?
Well, so there's 2 parts to it. The first is we don't know exactly what the plan is going to be because it's going to depend on what's approved in the subdivision and the types of housing. So your fire requirements depend on the size of your buildings, the construction of your buildings, like whether or not they're made with fire retardant materials and things like that. Sorry, I lost my train of thought. It'll depend on the number of buildings, and there's a couple of different ways to do those calculations, and we've at this stage used a simplified process until the details in the subdivision are decided. But we've calculated somewhere north of 600 cubic meters of storage that would be just for fire protection. The system would have to have a fire pump that's capable of meeting approximately 1,500 gallons per minute. And that would be the supply you'd expect to get, or the fire chief would expect to get out of a fire hydrant. So you'll have within the subdivision, and really as a function of the density, because the houses are closer together, you're gonna have fire hydrants. And they're gonna be attached to the distribution mains for the drinking water system. So the storage for fire is a combined storage, all with drinking water storage. There is some possibility you could bring a fire hydrant out to Highway 8 or out to Station Road. Those sorts of details are they're more in detailed design, so down the road.
This choice leaves flexibility.
Yeah. Excuse me. So again, I wanted to give idea of what this is gonna look like. Next slide, please. So this is almost identical to what I think it's gonna look like. The top one is in Alliston. You can see there's 2 wells there. There's a treatment plant, which is that building, and the tanks are buried in, and the treatment plant is sitting on top of the building. The next one down as well, so the closest building to the front of the photo is the wastewater plant. And you can see the tank vents on the candy canes outside. In this case, we had 2 separate buildings, one for drinking water and one for, which is the one in the back. And again, the storage tanks are buried underneath the building. So both of those concepts are sort of the size of thing that that you would expect to see. Those basically come down to what the recommendations in the draft DSR, and that's what's coming out of the phase 3 evaluation. So if we look to the next slide and we can talk about what are the next steps in the Class CA process. So right now we have NECP is reviewing the draft DSR. We have PIC number 3 coming up on January 8th.
Can you state that again, what PIC is?
Oh, Public Information Center, sorry. And that's scheduled for 4:30 to 7:30 on the 8th. At the Sebring Community Hall. Any comments that come out of the PIC and come from a ministry, we will incorporate into the draft DSR. And then that gets published, and that's the commencement point for that 30-day statutory review period. At that, it will be circulated to the ministry, to various agencies, to First Nations, stakeholders, members of the public. And during that 30-day period, any comments we receive would then also be incorporated into, or at least addressed. It's going to depend on what the comments are, obviously. They'll be addressed to create the final ESR. That then gets published, and as long as there's no request to the minister, which I believe there's also a 30-day window, then if there aren't any, or then the ESR is considered approved at that point. So there is a light at the end of the tunnel. I know it's been a long time.
And then we will attempt planning, right?
Correct, yes, after the 30-day statutory review period with all the agencies and the issuance of the final ESR. Then we would address the planning applications, of which there are 3, so that's official plan, zoning, and draft plan of subdivision.
Sam?
I have a question for each of you. Back to the Ardbergen drain line, who decides whether the drain needs any work on it or not? Who will look at that and?
Well, we'll talk about it with the engineer who's doing the stormwater pond design, and we'll also talk about it with the drain superintendent.
Okay.
So we'll make sure that that's reviewed as part of the design process, particularly for the outlet of the stormwater pond. In terms of flow, that's the critical point. And the wastewater plant isn't going to affect the hydraulics of the drain basically in any way, because it's only 3.7 liters per second average day flow. However, the outlet from the stormwater pond potentially could be much higher, and so that'll become the critical point.
Okay. And Caroline, this might be too early for a question like this, but the 3-story apartments, is there a plan to have elevators in them?
This time it's probably a bit early, because obviously there's the option between 8 units and 24 units, but it would have to follow building code, if elevators are required.
Probably in a 3-story, you'd have to have an elevator.
Likely in a 3-story,
Okay.
it's designed as an apartment building.
Thank you.
And I believe there's also a requirement in OBC, and I'm not an expert, but what I hear is 15% of the units have to be accessible. If you're building an apartment building under the Ontario Building Code, I'm sure there's other experts that can correct me on that, but that's what I've seen in other projects.
Okay, so floor is open for questions. Did you have one?
Yes, sorry, a number of questions tonight. So there has been some questioning throughout the community on the phase 2, the numbers between 15 to 20 years as wells and septic systems in the community was reflected. Can you sort of speak to where that came from? And
Well, so there's really 2 things that affect that, and part of that process is we talked with building officials in both townships at the beginning of the process, and one of the questions we ask is, what's the status of existing private services? And so in both cases, people said basically they're operating correctly and they're functioning correctly. The description in terms of general age is just a general description in the class CR, yeah, the class CA. So it wasn't particularly tied to whether or not it's 15 or 20 years, or it's tied to, are they functioning correctly? And if individual ones weren't functioning, could they be replaced and fixed according to the Ontario Building Code? So the other example of that is when we did Shakespeare. So in Shakespeare, which that started in 2007, the recommendation at that point from the township was that 70% of the septic beds in Shakespeare were failing. That you had raw sewage that was coming out into the roadside ditches. People couldn't let their kids go play outdoors and things like that. So the decision as to whether or not you service the entire community or just, or in this case, service the new development is in essence predicated on that, and also predicated on the desire of the overall community to, do they want to be serviced with a communal system or not. Recognizing that if you're going to add existing users, there's going to be development charges for them to connect and hook up to. And the feedback that we received from community members was, don't make us connect.
Yeah, so that's sort of what I'm looking for, where the data came from. They gave you the 15 to 20 years and what sort of polling was done in the community to get that feedback.
So it was a combination of comments from members of the community, but also comments from staff.
Yeah, because I would expect the Sebringville and Shakespeare have similar aged buildings, aside from. what-
No, because, so first of all, Shakespeare is a World War II, World War I wartime community. The lots there are considerably smaller than the lots here. And one of the main problems that they have in there is basically because of the size of the lots, almost every single septic bed is under designed and they're failing, and they don't have enough lot area to put in a proper septic bed. And that's, if you look at the lot sizes between the two communities, you'll see that Sebringville, the lots are considerably larger. There are some lots in Sebringville that don't meet the size requirements under the current Ontario Building Code. But because they're already existing lots of record, and because they are physically able to create a lot or a septic bed that would function properly, they would get that approval.
So you see no concerns that the Ministry of Environment may push back on this?
No, I don't. I mean, that decision is the Class A is a proponent-driven process. And so that decision is entirely within the prerogative of the co-proponents of the study. In the case of Shakespeare, there were 30 years of investigations for non-compliance before we got to 2007. So in that community, there was a well-known failure rate, and I mean, there's exposure and health issues and all kinds of things that you don't have any of those issues in Sebringville.
Any other questions? Go ahead.
Mike, you've actually answered a bunch of them, thank you for that. Just
I tried.
and some of these may not be able to answer because you're not the expert on it. So the first question here is actually coming back to the aggregate drain, and it's from the functioning servicing report, and I assume Matt is gonna have to answer this, Mr. Rutledge, but anyways. So I changed the numbers to gallons because liters mean nothing to me.
Right, yes.
So the stormwater pond holds approximately 2 million gallons.
Yep.
1 acre inch of water is 22,600 gallons. The site is 40 acres. So that's approximately 904,000 gallons.
Right.
For every inch of rain. So effectively, a 2.5 inch rain will fill the stormwater pond. Now, I realize it's dumping out at the same time.
Right.
But, and in my way of thinking, this will actually help the Iverton drain to a certain amount. Once you get over a 3 or 4 inch rain, the stormwater pond will have to have, or will have an overflow, I'm assuming. And then it will dump into the Iverton drain and it will overflow it. I talked to our drainage engineer and that will be, owner driven to clean that or increase it.
So,
Because it's a municipal drain.
yes,
So it'll be one of the landowners, and my concern is actually more with the owners of the land who are on the south side of the tracks. There is water there laying all the time now, if there's more than an inch of rain, there's water laying there already.
Yeah.
So if I was the farmer, I would be pushing to have that drain cleaned out.
so, I did speak to Matt, to sort of review, and I can answer that at least in a general way. My personal observations with respect to the properties on the south of the tracks is, I think there's culverts underneath the tracks that are plugged.
Yes. I agree.
So, anyway, your math is generally correct, so I would agree with those numbers. The one thing, there's two things that happen. First, so the catchment for the stormwater pond is roughly half of the catchment of the Ibergen drain that's upstream from Station Road. So what that means is you're controlling the flow up to the 250-year storm. Well, sorry, that's not quite accurate either. You're controlling the flow up to a certain point from the subdivision lands. So that's going to significantly reduce the overall flooding potential of the Ibergen drain compared to its current state where it's uncontrolled. The outlet, so is proposed to be regulated to the 5-year storm. So and in terms of getting a 2.5 or 3.5, 4-inch rainstorm, that's likely going to happen over somewhere between 4 and 8 hours. So during that time period, there's a certain volume that would actually get discharged from the stormwater pond in any case. So that makes the numbers go up a little bit. At the same time, you know, if anywhere in Ontario gets a 3.5-inch rainstorm in a day, things are gonna be wet.
That's lovely. Just a question then on page, let me see here now. Page 10, it is, page 11. Right? We can actually go to page 11. Can you go into page 11? Just so everybody can see. Yeah, thank you. Those proposed objectives and proposed compliance criteria,
Yes.
where did they come from?
So they're determined there's several different pathways to get to achieving a particular number. First thing that we do as part of the assimilative capacity study is we look at the dilution potential for the different receiving bodies. We look at what in this case, because it's a surface water discharge, it's related to the provincial water quality objectives. And another comparison in this case, because the Ibergen drain is dry much of the year, is the Ministry of the Environment have what they call dry ditch criteria. So and then the other thing that we look at is what's the capability of a regular treatment plant using regular commercially readily available technology to being able to achieve those criteria. So it's not an easy answer, but it's a function of all four of those processes.
So Ken, if you could go to page 12, the follow-up to this question is if you look at the design objectives, or even go to compliance criteria. I would consider the Shakespeare plant and the Stephenville plant are fairly
Yes.
close. And yet the Shakespeare plant is different criteria and different objectives.
Right.
It's half. I'm just curious why that is.
So two things, the criteria that are proposed in the Class CA are coming back to what I said about their sort of maximum criteria, and we would expect the final approved ECA for the plant to either match or have higher quality effluent. And so one of those functions is, what do we expect the treatment plant can achieve in a regular basis and given that? So there's two steps past the Class CA to finalize what those numbers would be. There is an opportunity that those two numbers could drop. At the same time, all of those numbers are provided to reflect that this is clean water that's coming out of
I'm
the
not
pipe.
worried about that. I'm just asking the
Why
difference.
is it
And
different?
probably
Sure.
the question is a little bit early,
Yes,
and I thank you for that answer. Later on page 16, it's mentioned that, it looks like the recommendation is to drill a second well in a different aquifer also, it says.
sorry, by different aquifer, what I meant is a different aquifer than what the private wells are using. So the private wells are using a shallow bedrock aquifer that is basically within 55 meters of ground surface. The test well was drilled basically double the depth. And the second well, we would recommend be drilled to that deeper aquifer as well. So the same aquifer as the test well, but different than what the private wells are using.
Okay, thank you. That helps. One other question from the functional study report, originally there were a couple options. One was to allow the septic plant to go into the Iberg drain. The other possibility was a pipe directly to Black Creek.
Right.
Was there a reason one was chosen over the other?
So part of that decision process is to look at, from a water quality perspective, the sensitivity of the receivers. The sensitivity of the Iberg drain is much less sensitive than Black Creek. Because it qualifies as a dry ditch. For example, we don't have to worry about fish habitat, whereas in Black Creek, you do. There's other habitat in Black Creek for species other than just fish. So the reason we picked it, well, there is the habitat question, the sensitivity question, and frankly, it's easier too.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay, great. Yeah, thank you for that answer. Couple more questions if it's okay. Any idea how much sludge will be generated per year?
So, the sludge is, it depends somewhat on what you do in terms of thickening the sludge and how you process it. A plant of this magnitude, if the sludge is untreated, will generate approximately 4 cubic meters of sludge per day. And that would be at about 1% solids. You're likely going to thicken the sludge up to 4 to 5, in some cases even a little higher. So you're looking at a couple of 100 liters per day.
Oh, that's great. And then one final question. You mentioned that the ESR is now going to comments from MECP, other government agencies, and also the public. Will those public comments, will there be a separate cover letter and how those public comments are addressed and answered?
We haven't specifically added a section, but
would the possibility.
If we could do that.
The
Yeah.
feeling from the community, certainly, rightly or wrongly, is that their concerns are not being addressed. And although the ESR cannot answer most of the questions, there are some questions that can be answered. And I was wondering, is it possible to have a cover letter or a cover piece in that ESR that says this question was about the plant, and we can answer, this is the answer, this is what we've done.
So
Hopefully that can be done.
there are sections in the draft ESR that deal with a summary of the main comments that have been reviewed, and there is some discussion in that section about how those comments were assessed. In some other studies, what we've done is provided a comment matrix that is maybe a little more explicit, so we can look at doing something like
I
that.
appreciate that.
And if I can just build on that,
Yes.
was something we evaluated on how best to sort of pull together the comments and provide a response, and what we were finding is a lot of comments, there were similar, almost identical comments, so they were grouped. And sometimes when there's few comments, you kind of hit every single comment, but we group them into themes, so we can certainly take a look at that to see how best.
Excellent, thank you very much for your answers. That'll be it, thank you.
Just also, the comments, people should be signing their names for the comments.
Some people have and some people have not.
Councilor Martin?
So questions that come in from the public already, will they be addressed by the January open house?
I'm sorry.
Or the questions that have come in already, that
Yes.
have been sent forward, even in the last couple of days, will they be addressed by the January meeting? Could we have those there so that we can build on those, and we can ask questions?
Before the January meeting, we can look at what those comments are. I've gone through them in a general way, and I don't believe any of those affect the recommendations and outcome. But I wasn't planning on revising and reissuing the draft ESR prior to the January 8th meeting.
No, that's not what I was.
Okay,
So
sorry.
can we have answers to those questions available at the public?
Yes, we will be able to talk to them, and I can provide a document that indicates for Township about how we would suggest responding to each of those bullets we put in.
And acknowledging that none of us
Yeah,
outside you guys are experts in this, right? So there may be questions that are outside of that. But
sure,
feel it's respectful to do our best to answer these questions.
yes.
Especially when they may be able to come to that event.
A lot of them do certainly pertain to the municipal approvals for the subdivision and are not related to Class CA points of view, but I can do that, and we can talk about it with BM Ross as well to make sure that we're of like mind.
Deputy Mayor.
Yes, there's been quite a number of concerns raised in the area that this is gonna cost taxpayers money. I just wanna confirm two things, that the subdivision is strictly that, it's owned by the developer, and all that will be paid by the developer. And one of the other costs were that the cost, who's gonna pay for the cost of the water and the sewage? And that too will be a user fee paid by the users. And if I can, it might be too early, but if I looked at the charges for the Shakespeare sewage plant, I think it worked out to something less than $30 a month.
It's $357 in 2024.
So less than $30 a month. And would it be safe to figure that probably the water usage is going to be similar or somewhat less than Black Creek?
Yes, I would expect that. Thank you.
Any other questions on this side? Councilor Jeffrey?
Thank you for the presentation. Just a couple of things, start with, Station Road, the culvert only size for 100-year storm. Is that something we should be looking at as a consideration or concern?
I'm sorry, sorry, I'm acting well and I'm having trouble hearing.
The Station Road culvert,
Yes,
it's only designed to a 100-year storm.
well, the capacity of the culvert, I'm told, is roughly 2,000 liters per second. So one of the things that Matt Runge has to do as part of the subdivision design is look at the design of the stormwater pond and the final direction for the subdivision, and the province have minimum standards as to what that has to be. One of those questions will be, does that culvert need to get replaced?
So it wouldn't change the discharge rate of the 2.7 liters per second?
No, that's correct. We wouldn't change that. It would only be related to what the peak stormwater discharge might be.
Okay, thank you. Next one, so it feels like there's not a standard MECP approval for effluent discharge and the criteria, because we give them parameters that we say they're gonna stay within,
Right.
and that's what we're graded to.
So the effluent criteria for every plant in the province is individually approved. And it's based on the individual configuration of the plant, the sensitivity of the receiving bodies, and certainly technology capabilities have changed a lot over time. And so plants that have been there, say, for 40 or 50 years, may have gone through half a dozen iterations where the plant is upgraded. And then those effluent criteria get changed whenever that performance is reviewed.
Thank you. Now, one very final question. In the well report, with the test well, you noted that there was well interference from, was it 4 local wells?
Yes.
Were interfering with others. Does that have any tie into some of the wells that went dry in Cedarville this summer? Are you
I don't really know the details of why. I don't know any of the details about the well that was reported as going dry. The interference that we saw during the pump test from one private well to another private well, if you look at that graph, you'll see every so often there will be a drop, but it comes back up. So that's when the neighbor turned on their pump and depleted a little bit of the water column in the monitored well. But once the pumping ceased, it returned back to its normal level. So there's no evidence that the private well use was contributing to a well failure.
Okay, thank you. That's all my questions.
One more.
One final question or just want confirmation. This subdivision, my understanding is that the sewer supply and the storm sewer going to the plant and the storm sewers will be 2 distinctly separate systems.
That's my expectation as well.
So,
Yes.
so then the opportunity, or sorry, the possibility is not there of the plant being overrun with stormwater.
So the standard nowadays is not having combined sewers. So the standard is to have completely separate system to make sure that raw sewage, and it happens like in Toronto, which is why all the beaches get closed, because they'll have combined sewers during flood. The stormwater floods over onto the sewage side, and all that goes in the lake. So that can't happen.
No, but we have it locally here too. The city of Stratford struggles with bypasses every
Yes.
year, 6 to 8 to 10 bypasses this past year. And although it's not raw sewage, it's not fully treated sewage.
Right.
So the phosphorus is definitely, extra phosphorus is being dumped into the lake
So
from Stratford.
there's,
So that possibly will not exist in Cedarville.
it should not, that's correct. I mean, we still have to go through the detailed design, but that's a fundamental. Part of the design is that doesn't occur. I'm gonna guess in Stratford, it relates to infiltration into the sanitary system. So when you get a big rain event, you have manholes and other points of leakage that bring in clean water as opposed to combined sewers.
Probably some of it is also, it's a 100-year-old system, some of it was combined
Yes,
years ago. Thank you for that answer.
Okay, I see Sam has one, and then we also do have BM Ross here, so if any counselors wanna direct any questions to BM Ross, you're more than welcome to.
I just wanna clear something up, and I think Ken had answered this a long time ago, but, oh, you know, when you have a drain in your basement, it's, your
yes,
sump
some
pump,
pump.
it won't be pumped into the sewer system in this new subdivision. Will it go into the stormwater, hopefully?
So the normal practice is it goes out to the side yard. In a few cases, like in Innisfil, it goes into the stormwater system. But we don't want that in the sewage system.
No, I know in St. Mary's they're suffering from it,
Yeah.
they're all pumping it into the sewer system,
Yeah.
which isn't good for it, but,
No, it's not good for the plant.
oh, yeah.
I can speak to that a little bit, so, a few years ago, under Ken's suggestion, we developed some subdivision design standards. And they've since been finalized, I think we might be in, the middle of a revision right now. But at the end of the day, just along with there, we'll have EDC connections for some pumps that will direct discharge into the storm system and not the sanitary tract. Yeah, so and that there's a couple benefits there, you know, one being the fact that you're not discharging to the side yard, creating nuisance, ponding, complaints from neighbors, and you're not getting any of that water coming over your sidewalk, especially in the winter. That's what.
Thank you.
All right, any,
One question for BM Ross, on page 2 of the report here, the second paragraph, it talks about BM Ross being in general agreement with the recommendations. Could you explain what general agreement is?
Yeah, I'll speak first, and Kelly was actually the author of this. My signature first. I think I was in the meeting, but nonetheless, so planners and engineers are typically, what's the word? Conservative, maybe, with the way we write letters.
yes,
At the end of the day, we are satisfied with the process that's taken place. It's been a very collaborative process with Mike and Carolyn and their team. We've had others in our office involved in the review. Steve Burns, who has 55 years of experience with water, wastewater, he's been reviewing the ACS with Mike, he's on my capacity study. So we're comfortable with where things are at in the process when it comes to the environmental assessment. You could maybe interpret into the use of our word in that letter as there's still work to be done. But that's the next phase of where we're getting into, where we get into the development and the subdivision agreement and the design drawings and all that sort of.
Thank you for that.
Yes, I'd say that covered that.
Martin?
Yeah, just to further to that, when our previous CEO was here, Fred, we spoke about having a report come with the things that BMS Ross had flagged. And what was done about it, what changes were made, has that kind of fallen through now? That was sort of at the end of, anyone else remember this? Okay, thank you, Mark. Like there was because there's questions on like, what have you guys caught? What are you doing for the township from the public, right? So it was discussed that the things that were brought forward that were changed because of your involvement would be shared.
Well, it was in that letter.
Yeah, that's a summary. There's
Okay.
lots of
That's all. of it.
email and correspondence that have gone between the two of us. I think Mike and Carolyn are getting sick of hearing.
Oh,
No, they've heard a lot of the statement that says,
Oh.
we're saying this for the best interest of the township.
Mhm.
So, and at the end of the day, they get that. So there's been a lot of back and forth. and a lot of revisions made as a review.
So it's all encompassed in this.
All right. Could you just reiterate what the next process is?
Okay, so then the two next items are the Public Information Center on January 8th and getting comments from MACP. And then if we have comments that arise out of the Public Information Center, we will take those comments and the comments from the ministry and address them to finish the draft DSR. At that stage, it gets published for a 30-day statutory review period. And any comments, and that draft DSR gets circulated to multiple agencies and First Nations, other stakeholders, members of the public, and basically to anybody who wants to read it. And any comments that are received in that 30-day period are then addressed to prepare a final ESR. And then that gets published. And then there's a comment period where someone could request of the minister under very limited conditions to basically bump up. They used to call it a bump up order, but now it's a Part 16 order. So that mainly pertains only to First Nations issues. And then if you get to the end of that period, it's considered approved.
And once it's approved, then it would move into a planning stage. We'd be moving on to other
Yes.
planning approvals.
We'd be coming back, working with the county and the township with county staff reports with their recommendations and their recommended conditions for the draft plan subdivision, which will include, as Dale mentioned, a number of detailed engineering design requirements that occur through the subdivision agreement.
And that's where we talk a little more about other details like traffic and that type of thing.
Correct, so that would be any matters under the planning application, so that's density, right, land use setbacks, traffic, and the like.
Okay. Perfect.
One clarification, so after the 30 days, you said there's you address it and there's going to be a final ESR. What time frame do we expect to see that? Is that 30 days? Is that 6 months, 12 months?
It'll be quick.
Will be less than 30 days?
I expect so. I mean,
So we would expect to see this wrapped up by the end of March.
I would love to see that, yes.
Well, you do the time, nothing.
The sooner the better.
Is there any chance we can get access to highway? Like down further for like is
That's,
That's back over to. That's really the Ministry of Transportation. So, we've asked, so there's a transportation engineer that's working for the applicant, that prepared the traffic study. We had conversations, dialogues, and emails asking about a second access, and the MTO was very quick and definitive. Not a chance, is the nicest way to put it. So the MTO actually has guidelines that says they will not allow a highway access if there is another means of access that's a non-MTO road. And so because the site has frontage on Station Road, per the MTO guidelines, they would only issue an access to the highway if the property was already existing and had no other frontage.
All right. Okay, seeing no further questions for anyone. Change the recommendation here. Okay, if you have the report, come back. Okay, so. Okay, so I'm understanding through the Zep here that I'm going to make a recommendation to receive the presentation. And that second one, because we want to clear all of the answers to the questions, we're not endorsing it. Yeah. Right? Okay. So I have a recommendation that the council receives the presentation of the Cedarville EA draft environmental study report. And that the council,
So just stop there.
okay, stop. Don't do after the end. Okay. EA environmental study report, moved by Councillor Corby, second by Councillor Jeff Bell. All those in favor, any opposed? That's carried. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank
For your
you.
time.
Thank you for your time this evening.
Lots of detail.
It's a bit of an understatement. All right, we're at 8:40, you want to have a break? Dave, 5 minutes? Yeah, we got still lots
You can't just go home.
We are back. It's 8:45
Just begun.
at our council meeting. We are on page 740 now. You have the floor.
Thank you, Mayor Ora. First report is my update report. Just finishing up some of the capital projects and the building condition assessment report. We've received it from ADSI. I've been trying to go through and just make sure everything, there's a lot of details in there, just make sure everything looks correct. I think there might be a few little adjustments. And then we have, working on getting them to present it to council next meeting.
January?
Yeah.
Okay, awesome. It
It has a question right now, so.
potentially could have come tonight, but it would be way too long. So. Okay. All right, any questions for Ken? Go ahead.
The Halkin had inspected the KW Center, was there any issues?
No, not this time. It needed to be inspected a bit more frequently though, because of some stuff that was corrected last time. So,
Okay.
Councilor Vanessa?
Could you, and would you be able to give a further update to the Black Creek well?
So the well is drilled. The development, the 24-hour testing stuff that they were talking about here, that's all been completed. And we're awaiting approvals from the ministry before we can do switch over and get it hooked up. So we're still running on the original well. The new well is ready. We gotta do the plumbing connection, but we gotta wait until we get approval to connect it. Then we gotta do the plumbing connections and get it going. So nobody will give me an exact on how quickly to get it from the ministry. The ministry has indicated they, got us on a priority. We've asked for like an emergency, quick response. But, still don't have an answer whether that means days, weeks, or longer, but the expectation is that we get that soon.
Thank you.
Right, I also want to thank you, I know it's not in your report, but Saturday there was an issue with the crossing, CN crossing, did you want to touch base on that at all, like?
Well, there was 3 crossings acting up. When I showed up here, there was the one on line 26, it's the CN line runs. And then I came in, that one fixed itself somehow or somehow stopped flashing. Then I came in and the crossings were flashing here on Perth line 20 and on 122. So not much to do other than get CN. They have to do the work on the crossing. So there's a little sign and numbers right on every crossing that that's where you call. They want to know, they call mile marker. If you say you're on line 26, they have no idea what you're talking about. So you gotta look at the sign. It gives them this mile 12, mile 92 or whatever it might be. That's the number they need to know where it is. But then they send someone out and we pay for part of that maintenance is that cost that we get every month for them to inspect and maintain these crossings, but they're responsible for the upkeep of it.
Thanks for doing that. Any other questions for Ken? Go ahead.
Just wonder, so right now the team's been doing a great job of pushing back the banks. But it makes the road look really wide. It's not just my neighborhood where people are falling off the road all the time. Is there anything in the bigger world of municipal roadworks, any ideas people have to solve this? Like, can we put out word in the newsletter? Like, I don't know, can you spray paint it? Is there something that we can do? There was one tonight across from my house, like it's constant.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of that, which we.
Yeah.
People that just pulling over and it's a ditch, but it looks
Yeah.
flat, that's the mark from the wing. If we built our roads like county roads with a wider shoulder with, that's a big expense, so, but, and we don't have to, they have a bigger road width, or right of way width too to help with that. So we could lower the wings and peel off sod, and then you see it, but then we get a lot of complaints about that too, so, yeah, I'm
I
not sure.
didn't expect there was, but.
I'm not sure if there's an easy answer.
Right, the parking.
I have a recommendation that the Director of Public Works update report be received for information, moved by Deputy Mayor Wellham, seconded by Councillor Corview, all those in favor, any opposed, carried. We are at Drainage Superintendent report.
Yes, thank you. Next update is Scott's update report. If anybody has any questions, you can answer. There was some resolutions from CN, speaking of railway stuff, on drains. Not necessarily related to us, but in the bigger provincial wide railways versus drains discussion, so.
Yeah.
Maybe things are progressing, that we'll see something sooner, but.
I remade,
Yeah.
remailed the bills.
Yeah, it kind of confirmed that they're responsible still, so we resend the bills to remind them, we'll see how it goes. But if anybody has any questions on anything else, then.
Councillor Jefferson?
Just Herman Drain, so. Did DFO walk the site on April 8th? Or, that you're still waiting for permits for DFO?
On the Herman Drain,
Yeah. This request was, so Sphere was pointed on-site meetings set for April 8th. DFO walked the site and provide comments on a possible permit to enclose, waiting on permits from DFO and proper temps.
The capital engineer.
maybe I'm looking at the report.
There's two room.
Oh, there's 2 Herman.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry, yeah. Well, and the way Scott does it, so they did. They inspected that on April 8th.
Yeah, maybe this is a question that was asked.
Yeah, I can check with Scott. I'm thinking we maybe have the permits.
Okay.
It doesn't say that yet.
I'm wondering what the timeline is getting the permits back.
Because usually DFO is very quick. If they walk it, with Scott or whatever, usually it's, within a few weeks, he's got the permits from them, so, I would expect we have those, but I haven't.
Okay, thank you.
Any further questions regarding drainage? If not, I have a recommendation that the drainage superintendent update report be received for information. Moved by Councillor Mark Bell, second by Councillor Corview, all those in favor, opposed, if any, carried. We are at the Perth East Boundary Road Agreement.
Yes, thank you. Last report here is, just, the current boundary road agreement that we have with Perth East for, our boundary road 112. The current agreement expires the end of the year. So, we're just renewing that agreement. There's some minor changes in some of the wording, insurance lingo and stuff, but the gist of it remains the same. We look after that section of road 1 year, and then they look at after the next year, alternating years. And that's the way it has been for prior agreement as well. So nothing really changing in it, but it's a revised agreement for the next 10 years with Perth East. If anybody has any questions?
Any questions?
Answer.
Nope, seeing none, I have a recommendation that the council of the township of Perth East, Perth South receive the Perth East Boundary Road Agreement report prepared by the Director of Public Works for information, and that the council of the township of Perth South approves the agreement and approves the authorizing bylaw to enter into the agreement. Moved by Councillor Vanessa, seconded by Councillor Jeff Bell, all those in favor? Any opposed? Carried. And at this point in time, I turn it over to Councillor Martin.
Okay, so, look at this. Look at it. So we put the accounts on the floor, November 27th to December 10th, 2025, and we have a mover. Moved by Councillor Jeff Bell, Councillor Mark Bell, second.
You ask if they have any questions.
Now, ask Tracy your questions.
Anybody have any questions?
Councillor Nye.
My name is Jesse. The question is actually for Ken. Did we buy a new disc more? Or am I reading that wrong?
We had some repairs to our current disc mower, the gearbox and stuff on it, it's quite expensive, yes.
Like the $9,000. What's the new one worth? A new disc more,
About double that.
okay. Is that just wear and tear? They're pretty new, aren't they? Like,
Yeah, they're fairly new, and yeah, I'm not, this gearbox needs rebuilt, and, we got a core on the old one, I'm not sure.
Anyone else? Councilor Vanessa?
Question under general administration, there's an invoice here from Accent Building Sciences. For the building assessment, I assume is for 24,577. Is that correct, Tracy?
That's for the building, yeah.
Is it possible to defer that payment until next month? We have not received that report yet as council. Not sure we have to pay for it yet.
I'm not sure if that's, is that a full payment, Ken? The invoice?
I think that's the final thing.
The final payment, yeah. So that would be council's discretion, whether they wanna hold that payment or not.
Will I make a motion to that effect? That council holds that payment until at least to the following meeting, when the presentation is made.
So, sorry, Councillor Vanessa, we currently have a motion on the floor, so we would either amend this to exclude that payment. I guess would be the best,
If you could do that, sure.
if Councillor Jeff Bell and Councillor Mark Bell are okay with that.
I am.
Yeah, not right.
So we would just add, accept payment to the company name, sorry, Accent Building Sciences. ACC and feedback.
If I could just make a comment, I'm just concerned about potential costs for late payment. You know, a lot of the invoices we get, if we don't pay you a bill on time, then they start adding interest on
They're gonna
stuff, so I just wanna make sure, I don't know if they would or not, but there's a possibility there could be some extra costs on that, I guess.
there's a possibility it wouldn't get paid either, the extra. I mean, the council hasn't received the report, I don't wanna pay for it before we receive it.
When do we see it?
The January meeting, so it's the next meeting. I mean, my concern is quite honestly, with this council, in the last couple of years, we've received a few reports that were absolutely very much. We paid for reports that we should not have paid for. And quite honestly, as a council, getting tired of it. And I would like to see a report to make sure it's worth the $25,000. I'm sure it is. But I mean, in my business, you never pay for something before you receive it.
How long have we had the report, Ken? I've got the data for. Couple weeks.
Say you won't want a couple.
Anything, any other comments, questions?
I'd just like to add that we, through Councillor Martin, I just like to add that I think we were expecting this a while ago, if I'm not mistaken. We were expecting this back in September or August.
Yeah, I would agree that the report is later than we expected.
Okay, so can I read the recommendation and you can probably start on it? Okay, recommendation that the accounts payable listing dated December 10th, 2025 for the period of November 27th to December 10th, 2025. In the amount of, I haven't done math here, so $257,952.70 be approved, accepting the Accent Building Sciences $24,577.50. Does that work? All those in favor? Vote in vain. How do we get with it?
You get a fine to all later.
Yeah.
That's one and done. All right, we are at page 766, the report for the accounts payable removal from the agenda. It's deferred to the center session. Tracy, you have the.
Through you, Mayor, or, yes, so the report was brought to council on December 2nd meeting. It was deferred until we could, come up with a different way to supply council with the accounts. And our IT provider has said that, he's fine with the emailing them to you guys through, as long as it's through the First South email. Because you go through our server and you have all protection, so, we're recommending that we do it via email going forward. So if there's any questions, be happy to try and answer them. Any questions?
One thing, if this, did you check to see if that fits within the meals to act? Like, there's nothing saying that we're out of line doing it this way.
There's nothing saying that you are supposed to even get the account.
Okay, sorry, thank you very much.
Yeah, because if you approve the budget, so that
Mhm.
you're actually approving the accounts that way, so
So just,
this is just an extra, yeah. So,
so,
but you're still getting, you're get still seeing them, but it's not, you're not doing anything wrong per se, through this bucket. Yeah.
Any other comments? Councilor Ness?
Just a question, if the councilors received that information by email, is it possible if there are questions that are emailed back to you and you could answer to the group?
Yeah, we could, you know, you have to be careful how you answer if it goes to everybody, if I could just say FYI only, because I don't wanna turn it into a meeting, right?
Oh, exactly, that's what I'm asking.
So I think that it could be, just an FYI, and then everybody's in the know of what you asked.
Thank you.
Any other questions for clarification? Okay, seeing none, I have a recommendation that the council of the Township of Perth South receives the report from the deputy CAO treasurer titled accounts payable removal from agenda for information. And that council authorizes the removal of the accounts from the council agenda and going forward receives the accounts payable listing via email. Moved by Councilor Corby, second by Councilor Jeff Bell. All those in favor? Any opposed? Carried. We are at your treasurer's report.
To you, Mayor, or I have my monthly reports in front of council. Basically the same as last month, I'm just like Groundhog Day, I do the same thing every month, so if there's any questions.
Any question, Nancy? Any questions for Tracy? None. I see a recommendation that the treasurer's update report be received for information. Moved by Councilor Martin, second by Deputy Mayor Wilhelm. All those in favor? Any opposed? Carried. Report for the reserve and reserve fund policy.
Thank you, Mayor, or, so this draft policy in front of council, is trying to establish some consistent principles and standards guidelines for managing our reserves and our reserve funds. I've gone through and, kind of put, target, calculations, how, when and why we start a reserve, those kind of things. So I'd be happy to answer any questions on, any of these reserves or targets. I also, attached a spreadsheet with our existing, reserves and their balances and kind of like a guideline of what those targets would be and what the annual contribution would be. Just as kind of a reference to where we're going, so happy to answer any questions or kind of brainstorm where you guys wanna go with this or.
Questions for Tracy? Councilor Ness?
Tracy, could you explain, certainly the first one, so, I'm looking here, page 6, former tax rate stabilization, which would be, we call them the general working reserve.
Right,
So at the end of the year, the way I understand this is written, that, if there's money left over at the end of the year, some of that money will go, the first $100,000 will go to tax stabilization, to that general working reserve. And the rest of it will go to other reserves.
So no, so the way I've tried to lay this out is we've kind of historically used reserve money to bring down the tax rate.
Correct.
So what I'm proposing is that at year end, when I finish up 2025, whatever surplus we have, we take 100,000 of that and we give it to the next year's tax rate to help bring it down. And then anything above that, we put it to this general working reserve. And I've got it targeted to be basically 10% of our own revenue. So last for 2024, it would have been 594,000. But what that's meant to be is more like a cash flow reserve, where if we certain municipalities, they can't afford to pay for these drains, like before we get the assessment out, or if we have some assessment risk that all of a sudden we get these something from MPAC, or we've lost some assessment, that kind of thing. So it's not used for capital budgets or anything like that, it's more of a cash flow reserve. And then, so I mean, I don't know what our surpluses are gonna be, but we're gonna if we go with this, we'll always use 100,000 right off the bat for the tax rate for the following year. And then go from there, so that's kind of the way I've got this reserve policy laid out.
You're trying to stabilize.
Yeah. And be consistent, so it's always gonna be the same every year, right, so.
Now, in the past, there have been some fairly large reserve, money left over.
Right.
And my biggest concern is that, we get our reserves too high. I think they're plenty high already. I would prefer to have some of that money go back to the taxpayers. Whether it's, tax stabilization to help lower the following year. Like if there's that much left over, in my mind, we charge the ratepayers too much.
Right, and that's why I'm saying 100,000 is gonna go back to them right off the bat. I mean, we shouldn't be budgeting for those kind of surpluses. Like, we have to get more of a handle on our budgeting, right? So, like, you shouldn't be budgeting for a surplus because that's against the municipal act. But I think this is kind of a start. Like, we know now, you guys know, every year we're gonna start out with $100,000 revenue for the taxpayers and then go from there. So I mean, we can change that. That's just kind of what I came up with for a starting point. I mean, I guess you could do the whole surplus if you really wanted to. But then you're fluctuating your tax rate. I'm trying to get a consistent tax rate, so it's not up and down, you're most consistent, yeah, so. That's certainly council's discretion, so if you wanna go with that.
Councilor Markbell?
Just a comment and then some questions. So a comment is, this is a good thing, the fact that we have to have a policy for a surplus.
Yeah.
There's some other governments that are running massive deficits over here. So I think that's a good start. There's an NA on I'm just wondering if you could speak to just the NAs that are on your chart.
So on my chart, there's an annual contribution that we consistently historically put in, like, if you look at the council laptop annually, we put 2,000 in that reserve, so that every 4 or 5 years we replace that. The NAs are not applicable because those reserves are going to be gone, like, we're gonna use those up because they're of no, they've been set up for something and they're not being used anymore, so I think we need to clean up some of these reserves, so I'm not gonna be contributing to them annually. We're gonna use them up as we go, so the NA is not applicable for an annual contribution. And then some of them are year-end surplus deficit because they're like the streetlights, the building department, the water. Their annual surplus or deficit just runs through their reserve because they're a user-based system, so.
I don't know, last question, I don't know if now is the time to talk through this, or when do we talk through these line items of the NAs and like when they get used up?
Yeah, we can talk about it now, so, that service delivery and efficiency, that 252,000. About 5 now, 6 now, that's the money we're using for the office renovations. Records management, I think there was the website upgrade, I think, all those were approved through that reserve. So those are gonna get used up. The election reserve is, we put into that. The COVID-19, I think it's just extra money that was left over from money that was flowing when COVID was happening. Those are.
The money frozen or?
No, there is no stipulation on what they can be used for, same as
Oh.
that greenhouse gas reduction, I think it's just a matter of if staff can come up with. Somewhere where we can start spending it and get them clean those out, or council can collapse those into. The working reserve, or they can collapse them into. Like the St. Mary's fire and the fire call recovery, I think that's money that's just been sitting there forever, like, do we? Do we collapse that into something else? It's totally council's discretion, so, yeah.
Okay, Councilor Mark Bell, you wanna finish?
Yeah, I'll finish up. So the greenhouse gas reduction money, is that like was that originally a grant?
I believe it was a departmental amount that.
Looking at me.
Yeah, I believe it was money that was set up in the operating budget for something that was going on with the county,
Sorry, to the mayor, I believe, at one point there was, I think North Perth had hired. A climate specialist that everyone contributed to. And that has evolved, and I have no idea where that position is. We've never had to pay towards it. They were supposed to fill out. It was a legislative thing that, yeah, has not really gone anywhere.
yeah. So I think just the budget just got, if it didn't get spent, it got put back in that reserve every year, so it's just been in and out, in and out.
Okay, basically the same as the COVID-19 money.
Yeah.
It's 7 years later,
Yeah.
but still.
Yes, exactly.
I was told that this money is frozen, so it can't be used for anything. That's the.
No, none of these are obligatory, so if it was obligatory reserve, it would be specified that you can only do it. Even that OCLIF reserve, the cannabis funding or whatever, I was talking to some of the treasurers and it's not really stipulated either, so we could use it for. We could move it to the policing reserve, or we could, do some other things with it, so none of these are like, it's not like a grant where you can only use it for certain things, none of these reserves are, set in stone what you use it for, so we do need to clean them up and get rid of them, cause it's just administratively, we're tracking stuff we don't really need.
Yeah, sorry.
I think we're making this way too difficult, let's collapse and get it over with, if you're gonna wait to spend it on something. Let's just collapse it into a working capital or equipment or something that we're gonna need it in anyway, so. I think it's getting way too difficult for what we have there. It'd be a lot easier just to use it.
Are you wanting to make recommendations tonight, or do you wanna send it back to staff to make the recommendations to collapse them, or what's the feeling? I know that it's 9:15, but.
I can bring back a report on the actual reserve balances, I think what we wanna pass tonight, or. Have you bring back one of the other is the reserve policy, if everybody's okay with it, or the start as a starting point of how we're gonna run the reserves. Or do you want that brought back, that's, I think what we really need is the policies, and, yeah.
I just wanted to mention one thing here about the Kirkton pool. I think that was specifically put aside. For
Yes,
school, and
that
that
was-
was for the community center, so that should stay aside.
Yeah, cause some of the ones I didn't put anything aside because they're gonna be at the discretion of council and.
Yeah, and
the
the
boards.
they are grieving as their own little baby, into that. So, Councilor Bell.
In response to Councilor Corview, I 100% agree. We have, we've been working towards this. I feel we've had some change in the treasury, so, this report has been coming for quite some time. I think we as a council wanted to collapse these for quite a while, so happy to see this coming and looking forward to the next steps.
Any other comments? No, then I see a recommendation that the council of the township of Perth South receives the report from the deputy CEO treasurer titled Reserve and Reserve Fund Policy for information. And that council authorizes the draft reserve and reserve fund policy attached to this report. Moved by Councillor Corby, seconded by Councillor Marfell. All those in favor, anyone opposed, carried. What was that?
Thank you, Mayor Orr. You have my update report. I have no idea what's on it. Any questions? I'll be happy to answer them.
Any questions for Lizette? Okay, seeing that, I have a recommendation that the clerk's update report be received with information. Moved by Deputy Mayor Wilhelm, seconded by Councillor Marfell. All those in favor, carried. We are at, there's a new integrity commissioner agreement.
Thank you, Mayor Orr. So, back in 2017, the original RFP was put out through the county to, for to appoint an integrity commissioner. This is something that was put forward through the province, that this was a requirement. So each 4-year term, we have renewed the retainer agreement with Aaron Barrellis. It has now come up for another renewal. We are required to have an integrity commissioner. So it's Perth County, West Perth, and ourselves who use the Aaron Barrellis services. As for South, we've never had an integrity commissioner claim yet, but we have to have them on retainer in case someone. So if you ever go to our website, we have a page that outlines the process, and it relates to our code of conduct policy. We do not pay a retainer fee. The only time costs are incurred is if someone is using the services. So I'm recommending that we continue using Aaron Barrellis as our integrity commissioner. If anyone has any questions, I'm getting really tired, so I'm starting to mumble.
Deputy Mayor Wilhelm.
No, I'd move the recommendation. It's great that they're on retainer, they don't cost us until they're used, so I think that's great.
It's the same sort of arrangement that we have with our closed meeting investigator that we renewed earlier with Gregory Stewart. It's only, we only pay if someone uses the service, so.
All right, seeing other questions, I have a recommendation of the report regarding the integrity commissioner renewal of retainer agreement December 16th, 2025 be received for information. And further that the CAO be directed to extend the retainer agreement with Aaron Barrellis LLP to act as the integrity commissioner for a 4-year term effective December 5th, 2025 in accordance with Perth County RFP number 2017-101. Moved by Deputy Mayor Wilhelm, seconded by Mark Bell. All those in favor? Any opposed? Carried. Will, we are at your report.
Thanks, Mayor Orr and members of council. A few of the items in my report have already been touched on tonight, so unless you have any further questions on that, again, I touched on the Seabrookville development in my report, the fact that there is the public information center coming up on January the 8th. And there's a separate report for the Biddulph Blanchard Fire Department as well, some amendments to not only the agreement to extend that for 1 year, but also to appoint an acting fire chief and acting deputy fire chief for the Granton Station. One note I would make under intermunicipal service and program matters is that we have scheduled a meeting for January 26th, Monday, January 26th, a joint meeting between the municipality of South Huron and ourselves. The primary work at that meeting will be looking at working towards an appropriate governance structure for the entire complex. That's the primary focus, and that's what we will stick to at that meeting.
Can I just ask, is it 6 p.m.?
We have not set a time.
Okay, I think we want later in the day only because some can't make it there, so.
Yes. 6 p.m. is definitely feasible to schedule for, if that makes sense for others as well.
That's perfect.
Make sure you schedule a hall.
Yes.
That is the next step. We will be making. We had a good conversation about this already, so.
Okay. Councilor Martin?
If we have weather that evening, will it go virtual or is there another date? We're looking at late January.
We haven't thought about that.
Okay.
That's something we can discuss. If we have to go virtual, that adds a component. We may have to schedule another in-person date if we do have to cancel the weather. But a very good point.
Councilor Murphy?
Just under legislative amendments in your report, and under C, did I read this correctly? We could be fined if we don't buy in Ontario and Canadian goods.
That is the proposed legislation right now.
That's quite something. Sorry. Okay, interesting. I just found that odd, like, I mean, I realize I'm also for supporting Canada, but if it's double the money, then why would we do that?
Yeah, that's definitely a fair point.
Councilor Vanessa?
Legislative amendments, item number 1. This road safety initiative funds, my understanding is that was a very fast turnaround. I believe like it's probably over already.
Basically,
Was Perth South able to apply for anything or?
I'm not sure if we did or not. I don't believe we did. No. We'll say no.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions regarding the report? I have recommendation that the CO activity report be received for information. Moved by Councilor Norfell, second by Councilor Vanessa. All those in favor? Any opposed? Carried. The report for the fire services agreement extension with Beacon Development.
Thanks, Mayor, or any members of council. As I believe I'm going to officially lose my voice soon. The 2 recommendations are there again, that the agreement be extended for 1 year. It is coming to the end here at the end of the year, so extending it for up to 1 year is the first recommendation. And the second one is the appointment of an acting fire chief and an acting deputy fire chief.
Any questions, comments? Go ahead.
Normally, if I can expand a little bit, normally we would have this sort of 5 or 10 year, but seeing as Luton Godolph is going through a fire review. And they are probably, well, they are going to disband both boards and have it fall under administration. And then we'll, or staff will have to negotiate probably a fee for service rate. So this is extending it so we can get that all put to bed before the agreement expires.
Thank you. Okay, I have a recommendation that the council approve the fire services agreement extension of up to 1 year with the Township of Beacon Godolph for the operation and governance of the Godolph Blanchard Fire Department. And further, that council approve the appointment of acting fire chief Brian Bates and acting fire chief Brad Mayer for the Godolph Blanchard Fire Department. Moved by Deputy Mayor Wilhelm, second by Councilor Corbeau. All those in favor? Any opposed? Carried. Any correspondence? No. Any council reports? Councilor Corbeau, we'll start with you.
Yeah, I've had a mobility bus meeting and a fire board meeting, and the mobility bus people met with Ken today and went and looked at the vehicle in Stratford, so sounds like they're game, so see where that goes. Other than that, everything's good.
Okay.
All's fine.
Very quick, the county tree bylaw was, held at motion, I think it was well attended and well received and lots of information, so. I think we'll see some adjustments or something come forward on that, which hopefully they'll send out to all the volunteers before it goes too far and fast or anything.
Councilor Martin? Nothing before. Councilor Jeff Bell?
Quiet for me.
Myself, yeah, I attended the forestry information meeting there last week, and yeah, it was, for the weather, it was well attended. So it was a good meeting, and one other thing here, last week in, during a CPAC meeting, that vehicle we're looking at is a Ford Explorer, and it has 160,000 K on it, 2022 hybrid, police suspension braking and a pursuit package. So just for information, council.
They can get their patients to the
They can get your
hospital.
I feel like I'm extremely busy, but it's mainly been with county stuff, so again, tree bylaw. We had a meeting here, regarding the Rannick service, we have put a tentative date out of Sunday, October 18th to have a special celebration. We're trying to confirm with, John Meter's office in Matthew Ray if that date will work with them before we finalize anything. I've been to ISO webinar, CKNX is looking for some interviews. Lots of just great discussion and, yeah, nothing really out there that I can think of. Besides that. Well, I guess I did take on being deputy warden of the county, so that's another step for me, so that's my onboarding there. Okay, we've got nothing else for bylaws, so recommendation at the bylaw 54, 2025 being a bylaw to authorize and boundary road maintenance agreement with the Township of Perth to be given first, second, and third readings and be properly signed and sealed. Moved by Councilor Martin, second by Councilor Jeff Bell. All those in favor? Any opposed? Carried. Second bylaw, that's the bylaw 55-2025 being bylaw to authorize an extension of the fire services agreement with the Township of Luke and Bidoff be given first, second, and third readings and be properly signed and sealed. Moved by Councilor Martel, second by Councilor Forview. All those in favor? Any opposed? Carried. No announcements? No notices of motion? Other business? Nobody here for questioning period? We are at confirmatory bylaw and I'll pass it over to Councilor Martin.
Okay, have a recommendation that the bylaw 56-2025 being a bylaw to adopt, confirm and ratify matters dealt with by resolution of the Township of Perth South be given first, second, and third readings and be properly signed and sealed. Moved by Councilor Bell, Mark Bell, and Councilor Corby second. Those in favor?
And we are adjourned at 9:28, moved by Councilor Martin, seconded by Councilor Ennis. All those in favor? Carried. Thank you. Merry Christmas, everyone.